Rain slashed across the border town of Laredo, Texas in 1876, soaking mud, blood, and misery into one. Under a torn canvas tent, a young woman named Joyce Calder lay on a splintered table, wrists bound, body trembling from childbirth. Her newborn's cries pierced the storm, but no one cared. The soldiers outside laughed and drank, preparing her for auction. For one breeder and bleeder. They jeered, dragging her into the open rain. Then, through the drunken haze, a tall man stepped forward. Brian Rowe, face shadowed beneath his soaked hat. He didn't shout or haggle. He laid $200 on the crate. The laughter died. The gavel struck. In that instant, he bought her not to own but to set her free. As lightning tore across the sky, Joyce held her baby for the first time, and somewhere within her, the storm began to break. The rain followed them through the night, but by dawn, Brian had led Joyce and her newborn to a small wooden cabin on the outskirts of town. Inside, warmth wrapped around her like a forgotten dream. Firelight flickered, the air scented with cedar and safety. She stood frozen, unsure whether to trust the quiet. Brian tended to the fire, moving carefully so as not to startle her. He brewed tea, patched blankets, and left space between every gesture. Joyce drank in silence, her eyes lingering on the cradle by the hearth. The man spoke little, yet everything about him said she could rest without fear. As she watched her child breathing softly beneath an embroidered blanket, a word came unbidden to her mind: hope. The storm still raged outside, but within those four walls, something fragile and warm began to take root. A promise she dared not name yet. Morning sunlight spilled through the cabin's cracks, chasing away the night's chill. Joyce rose quietly, wrapping her few belongings in a faded cloth. She meant to leave before gratitude became another kind of chain. Outside, Brian fed his horses, sleeves rolled up, face calm. When she told him she should go, he didn't stop her, he simply nodded. Yet something in his voice lingered, steady and kind, reminding her she wasn't a burden. The weight of his words followed her to the gate, where she froze. No one had ever given her the choice to stay before. She turned back toward the cabin and saw her baby cooing in the cradle by the fire, sunlight tracing the outline of peace. Joyce realized that freedom wasn't in walking away, it was in finding a place where she no longer had to. Quietly, she unpacked her bundle and stayed. Winter arrived early, pressing cold against the cabin walls. One night, a soft knock echoed through the storm. Brian opened the door to find a tiny girl, barefoot and shivering, holding a torn stuffed bear. A note pinned to her shawl read, "Better with you than men like me." Joyce hesitated at the sight of her, torn between pity and fear. They had little enough for themselves, yet she couldn't bring herself to close the door. The girl said nothing, just looked at the fire with hollow eyes. Joyce placed a bowl of warm milk and bread by her feet. When night deepened, the child whimpered in her sleep, and Joyce lifted her into bed beside her own daughter. The girl's head rested on her shoulder, small and trusting. Joyce whispered into the dark, "Just for tonight," but her arms already holding tighter, betrayed her heart's truth. Days later, the past came riding back in the shape of a man in black wool and arrogance. He arrived with a contract, claiming Joyce as property, for freedom only borrowed. His horse stamped impatiently as he waved the paper in Brian's face. "She's indentured," he said, smirking. Brian's hand didn't move to his gun. Instead, he fetched a small leather pouch from the porch. He laid $600, every cent he owned, into the dust. "That's twice what you paid," he said quietly. "Now ride away and never come back." The man's greed won out, and with a sneer, he took the money and disappeared into the wind. Joyce sank to her knees, the fear leaving her body in waves. Brian caught her before she fell. For the first time, she didn't pull away. She cried not from terror, but from the dizzying weight of being safe. The cold months settled heavy on the land. Joyce grew pale and weak, fever stealing her breath. Brian worked without rest tending fire, feeding the girls, keeping watch through long nights. Wren, the little one they'd taken in, sat by the hearth clutching her one-eyed bear, whispering that Mama would wake up soon. Hope whimpered in her cradle, and Brian hummed low tunes to calm them both. When dawn came, Joyce stirred, her skin cool and eyes open at last. She found him still beside her, exhaustion written across his face. "You stayed," she rasped. He only nodded. From that moment, something unspoken bound them, a promise made in silence, born from endurance. Wren climbed into bed beside her. Hope nestled close, and the cabin exhaled warmth again. Family, Joyce realized, wasn't what you were given. It was who stayed when everything else left. Asterisk by spring, the snow had melted into the earth, and the rhythm of living returned. Brian patched the roof while Wren followed behind, handing nails and giggling at every hammer swing. Joyce tended the small garden by the fence, the sun painting her hair gold while baby Hope crawled in the dirt beside her. It wasn't much a cabin, a few horses, a field of half-grown crops, but it felt whole. Each day brought laughter instead of fear, and each night, the quiet no longer frightened her. At dusk, they sat on the porch, hands close but not yet touching, the silence between them tender and easy. It was no grand romance, no story told in fireworks or vows, just the slow, steady work of people learning how to stay. And in that rhythm, they began to build something that neither storm nor sorrow could break. Asterisk one evening, Joyce dropped a cup while washing dishes, and the shatter made her flinch. Old ghosts never left quietly. Brian knelt to gather the pieces, his movements gentle. "It's just a cup," he said, but her tears said otherwise. Without a word, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin iron ring, dull, scarred by time. "My father wore it through to wars," he murmured. "He lost a finger but never the ring." He held it out to her. "It's not gold, but I stay. That's what I've got." Her breath caught, trembling as she slid it onto her finger. No preacher, no papers, no witnesses, just a promise spoken through quiet eyes. Outside, the wind rustled the grass, and Wren's laughter drifted from the yard. In that moment, the world stopped needing to prove itself. Love had already settled in to stay. Asterisk under a bright blue sky and a cottonwood tree. Joyce wore a cream dress sewn from old sheets. Brian stood beside her in his worn shirt, a rosemary sprig pinned to his chest by Hope's tiny hands. Wren recited a simple rhyme she'd written herself, her voice bright with pride. There were no papers signed, no crowd to watch, just sunlight, wind, and the steady rhythm of hearts that had survived too much to need witnesses. When Brian took Joyce's hand, she didn't tremble. The world around them seemed to pause as their lips met, soft, certain, real. They spent the evening laughing with the children, eating stew by the fire, and later, wrote their names in the old family Bible, for the first time. Their names weren't numbers, not debts, not ownership, just people who chose to belong to each other and stay. Asterisk weeks later, a soft knock came at dawn. On the porch lay a tiny newborn wrapped in a faded quilt. A note pinned to her chest that simply read, "Forgive me." Joyce lifted the baby carefully, feeling her tiny heartbeat steady against her palm. "We'll call her Ivy," she whispered, "like green growing through stone." Brian nodded, his smile quiet and sure. The two older girls slept inside, unaware that their family had just grown again. As the morning sun rose over the prairie, the cabin glowed in its light, a place once built from sorrow, now filled with laughter and life. Joyce pressed her cheek to the baby's head and felt the weight of all she'd survived melt away. Freedom, she realized, wasn't given, it was built, one choice at a time. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to my channel, Tales of the Wild West, for more stories of love, loss, and the courage to stay.